Welcome back, recruits, to our part 2 of our Naval Flight School conducted by the 1st Naval Aerospace Squadron. I am Lieutenant Commander Mr. Everything, and I will be your instructor for today's block of instruction. Now, what we're planning on doing today is taking a look at the cockpit, the HUD, or your heads-up display. We'll also be looking at your MFDs, or your multifunction displays, the icons, where they're located and what they mean, and how to use keyboard shortcuts for some of the items. Now, the first thing I want to point out is you notice that I am not wearing a helmet. If you do not have a flight helmet, you will be limited on what can be displayed on your HUD. There are a variety of helmets, hundreds of helmets out there, and they fall into a variety of different categories. The best helmet for flight operations is a flight helmet. There are a number of different helmets, from civilian, industrial, mechanical, repair, flight, combat, the list goes on. The best helmet for flight operations would be the flight helmet, obviously. Now, I have a flight helmet here I'm going to put on. If you do not have a flight helmet, I advise you to go out and get one, or at least a combat helmet. All right, our next step is the cockpit. All right, so to enter your cockpit, you'll come up to the stairs or your ladder or the door or whatever it is for your vessel. But in this training, we will be using the F-7 Charlie, which is a civilian model Hornet. You'll notice where it says canopy, it says ladder, but you'll also see floating, it has enter pilot seat, and F is the default keystroke to make that happen. When you open the ladder, be sure not to be standing immediately beneath it, or you might actually be injured. Climb in to the cockpit. When you enter your cockpit, there will not be anything powered on for the first time. You can go ahead and press Z. For those Brits out there, you might call that Z. I call it Z, or zebra, or Zulu. Go ahead and press Z, and what that does is it gives you a free look around. You can now look around at whatever you want after you press Z. If you press Z again, your head will center to look dead center of your crosshairs. Now, if you press and hold F or Foxtrot, you will be able to get a mouse finger or a mouse pointer or a button press icon on your screen, and you can scan around and look for various buttons that operate your fighter. But the one we're looking at is the one over on the right, and it's called Flight Ready. And you press that, and what it does is it turns your ship on. It turns all the guns on. It turns your thrusters on. It turns everything on. Your shields are generating. You can see the red outline of your shields generating. Now, because I have a flight helmet, my self status is projected onto my helmet HUD, which you can see in the upper left hand corner of the screen. Okay, so everything on or displayed on what you think might be the glass in front of you, like a little hologram that's being projected into the area of the front of your ship, that is called the HUD, or the heads-up display. Also, you'll have a HUD which is projected inside your helmet, a lot like Iron Man, which is your helmet HUD, which is it's a slightly different type of HUD. You can see it moves with your head movement. The CRTs, or screens that are in front, these are called multifunction displays. And the reason why they are multifunction is because you can set them to do a variety of different tasks. And we're gonna talk about that first. We're gonna talk about your MFDs first. When you hold F, remember, you can look around. You can also get an icon to interact with things like exiting your ship, or this button right here between your legs, which is right here, which is eject. Be sure not to press that. You got your power off. You got your engine on. Your engine should already be on. If you notice, you got a little light here. It's called thruster. It's green. That tells me your engines are already on. If you press I would normally be for your engines. Engines offline. You can see how your engines are offline and that thruster light goes out. You press I again. Engines online. Very good. Okay, let's talk about the multifunction displays. Okay, I'm going to press F so that I can interact with buttons and look around my cockpit. Now I use the mouse wheel to zoom in or zoom out. Okay, if you have your mouse pointer over something that can scroll and you roll the mouse wheel, then something will scroll instead. But next thing, we've got these left and right arrows. I don't want it to be on self status. I want it to be on power. Power management. Okay, we're going to talk about what to set these on and all that in the future. But if you notice, I'm rolling my mouse wheel and it rolls through all the different power settings. It doesn't zoom in or zoom out. If I had a pointer out here and I roll the mouse wheel, it zooms in and zooms out. You can click on these to increase your output or what have you. There you go. Now, if you want your power on the right and not the left, you could adjust here, and then you could put like maybe your target status so that when you lock onto a target, it will display it right there. A lot of times your self status will be displayed in the upper left and your target status will be displayed in the upper right, but sometimes that varies depending on the ship and the helmet you're using. All right, let's talk about this heads-up display that's in front of us. I could go on for hours talking about a variety of different things, but this is the basic course, so we're not going to go over every single detail. But just know I'm going to give you the basics so that you can get flying right away. And then in a future advanced course, you'll be going over all that. First thing you want to know is you got a compass heading right here. It tells you what your heading is. You also have a ladder right here that is incremented in 5-degree increments. as you nose up, you can see the ladder moves, and that'll give you your angle. So like 0 would be parallel with the ground and 90 would be straight up and down. This right here is your throttle / velocity indicator, and then over here you've got a boost indicator, and this bar here is your altitude indicator. I have set this up to be the advanced HUD. So let's go back to the MFDs, go to configuration, which is here. We go right here to the HUD there, and you can turn on and off the advanced configuration. The default looks like this, where you've got your velocity here, you got your boost here, and then you have your altitude here, and ladder and compass. None of that's changed. You just don't get any of the additional information. I personally like the advanced HUD just because, mainly one feature, this line right here, relative altitude, it tells you how high you are off of the dirt. And then atmosphere, it tells you what the atmospheric pressure is outside. The higher the atmosphere, the slower your vessel will be able to fly. When you get out into space, when there's 0 atmosphere, it can book. Now you also have a G rating, and this tells you in which direction your G rating is applying against you. And there it is right there. You're sitting on a 1G. And then if you look up here, you've got decoy and noise. Noise is your chaff or like metallic flakes, and that's noise. And then decoy is like your flares that would defeat infrared missiles. Okay, you got quantum fuel and hydrogen fuel listed in 2 places. 3 actually, if you want to consider the MFDs. But you have quantum fuel here, and then if you look up, well, you won't see it here, but you'll see it when you enter into nav mode. Okay, so let's take a look at your velocity indicator. When you want to increase velocity, you would normally press the W key, and you can see how the throttle right here will go up every time, right? Okay. Then you've got this line up here on the top, which is you have what's called a speed limiter. If you hold left Alt, the same side of the HUD as your throttle, the left Alt, and then use your mouse wheel, you can adjust your maximum speed. So if you don't want to go very fast, you want to go slow because you're trying to really be precise, you can lower your maximum speed so you don't accidentally thrust too fast. But usually 99% of the time you're just going to leave it on maximum. Look down here where you got your joystick, right? This is your joystick, and of course you got like your throttle over here, but this is your joystick. And if you're using VJoy, which I am using, which is a mouse, I'll be using a mouse to represent my joystick. You can see that by moving my mouse from left to right, my hand on the joystick is moving it left to right. And if I wanted to go into a climb and I raised my joystick, or I should say raised my mouse, you'll see that he's pulling back on the joystick. And same thing, if I wanted to dive, you'd be pushing forward on the joystick. So this mouse simulates the joystick movement. and you can see a line, the triangle that comes out of the crosshair, and then the further away from the crosshair you get, the more impact it has on your movement. And it'll also have a trailing line pointing back at your crosshair, and it gets brighter and brighter the further away you get. Okay, it just helps you identify where your crosshairs is at when you're dogfighting or what have you. Now, the reason why I am instructing the course with a VJoy or a mouse and keyboard is because, like my old dodgeball instructor told me, if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball. So what I'm trying to say is, if you can fly with a mouse and keyboard, you can fly with any control system. So teach you with mouse and keyboard, and then if you want to switch over to a HOTAS or 2 joysticks or pedals or whatever you want to adjust to, you can. But mouse and keyboard is the most accessible by most players, and there's a tactical reason why I personally prefer the mouse and keyboard, and we'll talk about that in a future video. Okay, now when you look at the upper left, you see this thing called SCM and gun. Okay, what that's saying is you're in a combat mode and guns are selected. So if you pull the trigger or left mouse, you're going to fire your guns. That can change by clicking your third mouse button, which would normally be your mouse wheel. You just click it, and you notice it changed. It's still combat mode, but it switched to missiles. So now I'll be selecting missiles, trying to lock on. If I press my center mouse button again, it now goes to a scanning mode. You notice that the velocity indicators spread out to make room for scanning. And you'll see right there right here, it says 90 degrees. You can narrow that by using your mouse wheel to adjust the scanning angle. Usually you'll never have to mess with that, but if you wish, you may. Press center mouse button again. We'll talk about scanning in a future video. Center mouse button should bring you back to combat mode with guns, and rolling the wheel here will adjust which guns are selected. Okay, let's switch to here. Okay, these little square boxes here tell you which guns are selected. You notice how I'm pointing at it and the guns are being highlighted on which ones are going to fire. And also, if you look in the upper left, same thing. This and this are it's like a mirror image direct broadcast. And if you look at the text, it says attrition 3s. So those are the guns that I have selected. If I roll my wheel, okay, well, that's why I've got it. I had F pressed. So rolling a wheel while you have F pressed is zooming. So if I don't have the F pressed and I roll my wheel, I can select different guns, right? And depending on how you have your guns set up during gunnery, nope, not gunnery, guns, how you have them set up into their fire groups will let you know. The number inside that box is how many shots you have, because it has to recharge. It's electric. If it was ballistic, you'd have different numbers there, that would be how many bullets you have. You'll notice up here it says gimbal, and then it has fixed. That means when I pull my trigger, it fires straight forward. If I press G, puts my guns on a gimbal mode, you'll see where it says manual. The gimbal is now manual. Now it'll fire where I point my crosshair or where my joystick moves. Now you'll notice these little balls following the crosshair. Those are the turrets trying to keep up with your mouse movement or your joystick movement. If you move here, they will eventually catch up. Now, some guns can't shoot this high, so the gimbals don't go that high. Some guns don't shoot this far to the left, but some do, right? So your guns, like if I'm over here, some guns are shooting there and some are shooting right about, right about there, because that's as far as the gimbal for those guns will go. And if you press G again, it centers everything to the center. So you can move your joystick around, it doesn't matter. They're still going to fire at the crosshair. When we get into combat, there's another icon that's going to show up. It's called the pip. And it basically is an aiming assist. It tells you where you should aim for your weapon to hit the target you have selected, because it's moving across the screen, so you have to lead the target. There's something called lag pips. So there's lead pips and there's lag pips, and that's a personal preference on how you want to select those. If you choose lead pips, the target has a pip in front of it that lets you aim there and hit it when it moves there. A lag pip attached to your crosshair, and it tells you where your shots are going to land, and so you would want your lag pip to be on top of the enemy. When we get into the combat video, I'll explain all that. One more thing that's on this broadcast that you might want to see is your radar, which is right here, right? I'm going to hold F. I'm going to zoom in. Right there, that's your radar. And you'll notice your heading is 311. If I remember right, my heading is 311. And this is how many, I think this is how many kilometers your sensors that are scanning for. Now, with my mouse pointer over the radar, you can roll your mouse wheel and you'll notice this scan range changes, right? And you can see other targets now are being pulled, because my range is so much larger, I can now detect ships further away from me. Right? And there's the kilometers. 1 kilometer. That's I'm just going really high, maximizing it. Now you can see the wheel around the outer edge is starting to move as well. That's interesting. Now your target, a red line or a green line or a white line, indicating if it's below or above your artificial horizon. So it'll give you an indication if they're above you or below you. Now, last thing before we end this cockpit is the right mouse. If you click the right mouse once, you're going to get a zoom. Right? There you go. And your HUD changes slightly to indicate that you've zoomed in. If you click it again, you'll be back to normal view. Okay, so that's clicking it once toggles this on, right? Well, now if you hold the right mouse, you'll zoom in 100%. There you go. And if you let go, it'll go back to normal. So 100% holding, letting go, back to normal. If you tap it just once, you get like a smaller zoom. It says 22%, 22.21%. Okay, we're going to switch to nav mode, and I want you to notice the difference in your HUD. And I switch to nav mode by holding B or Bravo. Okay, you'll notice that you get this circle around your crosshair. Your crosshair disappears. Your shields vanish because all that energy is being directed into your quantum drive. And now if you look in the upper left, you'll see your fuel levels. So it tells you your quantum fuel and how far you can travel, and your hydrogen fuel. And if you look here, it says nav mode quantum travel. There is a nav mode flight travel, but I never use it. And that is, if you're in nav mode like this, you can just press your center mouse and it puts you in a flight mode. But your quantum is still active. So you have nav mode where you can scan and quantum travel. Because if you're going to scan, you might as well be in normal space combat mode. All right, and when we get into quantum traveling, navigating waypoints and stuff like that, I will explain, but mostly it's exactly the same. It just allows your spacecraft to violate physics, so you can travel close to the speed of light from world to world. But also when you're flying around a planet or close to a planet, you will be traveling faster than aerodynamically possible. So you can get into accidents very easily if you find yourself in quantum travel mode when you're trying to just fly normally. So be aware of that. All right, so what did we talk about today? We talked about helmets. There's a variety of different helmets, and they will affect how they interact with your ship. We talked about your HUD, or your heads-up display, the icons that are on it. We talked about your MFDs, what are on the MFDs, how to cycle through them, how to select and click on them. We talked about turning your ship on using Flight Ready. You can also set hotkeys for these. I have B for quantum, right? I also have I for the engine.
Engines offline. Engines online.
And I have U for power.
All systems offline.
So you can power your ship on without the thrusters being turned on.
Aerospace. All
So if you're powered on and you can't, you're pressing spacebar and you're trying to take off or something like that, nothing's happening. Well, you might not have turned your engines on. Another thing, another way that you can turn your engines on, other than I, is by clicking these little boxes right here. So like if I wanted to turn my guns off,
Weapons
I could
offline.
I could do that. Engines,
Engines offline. Shields offline. Weapons online. Engines online. Shields online.
just like that. Okay, we talked about gun gimbals, which we'll get into more details with that in the combat modes. We talked about nav mode, where you are in quantum travel. We talked about where your fuel is located. We talked about zooming with your ship's magnifier, and the VJoy. All right, well, that was the second video in the series. I'm planning on 5 videos as part of this basic training series. So I'll see you in the next one.